All right, we got a couple things to do today. I revised this schedule a little bit, but I didn't send it out to you. So, yesterday we went over the third version of that calculator program. I passed out the website responsive design exercise, and then it was lab. Today I'm going to go over a couple more array programs. You've got hard copies that you've been given, so I'm just going to go over those hard copies. All right. A few people had expressed concern about a couple of the homeworks, in particular 3.3 and 3.4, so we're going to go over those. And then the rest of the period will be lab. Now, what we have down here for tomorrow is written test, and that's fine. So we'll do that first thing, and then lab rest of the period. Then on Thursday, I'll lecture on Chapter 4. I have to create these debugging exercises. I haven't done them yet, and then it'll be lab for the rest of the period. There's no class Friday. All right. I do have a couple more handouts. Sorry, I'm giving you a bunch of stuff. I got an email from Evan, who's my counterpart in St. Louis, saying that, for lack of better words, he doesn't like any of the exercises at the end of the chapter. So he created some of his own. And I'm going to pass those out. I haven't done them yet. He just sent them to me yesterday. All right, but I'm going to pass them out. You don't have to do them if you don't want to, but I will do them probably in front of you next week, or at least some of them in front of you next week, to hopefully give you a better idea as to what's going on in here. All right. So again, you have a couple copies of this thing, and I'm not even sure exactly which ones I gave you, but I think it was Array Fun V1 and Array Fun V2. All right. So I'm going to go over those right now, and again, my hope is that this starts to make some sense to you. Arrays are among the hardest thing for people to understand when you're first starting to learn a programming language. All right. Now, you may or may not agree with that, okay? If I go over this particular program example, which I'm going to go over it with you in just a second, but if I run this, all right, so it says I've already called the routine to generate 25 random numbers between 1 and 100, so I'm going to print those out, and there they are. I set it up like this because if I set it up the other way, they run right off the screen. So there's the numbers. If you run it, you're going to get different values because they're random. All right, so there's the random numbers. Then if we put in a 3, we can get that in ascending order. So you can look at this, and hopefully you can tell by looking, 8's going to be the smallest value, and 100's going to be the largest. All right, just by taking a look at it. That's ascending order. There it is in descending order. Here's the largest, which again should be 100, and it is. Here's the smallest, which should be 8, and it is. Here's the sum of all 25 of the elements put together, and that's 1311. And here's the average, which is the 1311 divided by 25, which gives you 52.44. All right? So what I want to do is take a couple minutes and go over this program with you. All right? So I've just run it, but I would rather go over the program where hopefully it makes some sense to you. One of the things they mention in a lot of books, all right, is that you might want to make a constant. If I wanted to change this from 25 to, I don't know, whatever, 500, the only thing I'd have to change would be right there. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Do you see how the word const right there is in blue? That there's a good news and bad news about that. The good news is that browsers are starting to recognize the word const, which creates a constant in this language. That's the good news. The bad news is most browsers don't enforce it. So even if you create something and you make it a constant, you can still change its value. You're not able to do that in most other programming languages, but Java has been or JavaScript rather, has been kind of late coming to the game. All right, so that's the best answer I can give you as to why that is. All right, so I'm creating 2 arrays here, and they're going to be identical arrays, at least when they first start. All right, they will be identical arrays. What's going to happen is when I go and copy everything in, I'll copy it into this array called numbers. But I want to be able, if you look, one of the options I want to give the user is to print out the array in the original order. So if I want to print out the array in the original order, I somehow have to keep the original order. Would make sense, wouldn't it? So as I read these numbers into the numbers array, I'm going to copy them into an array called original. So the array that's called original, when we first start the program, these two things are going to be identical. They're going to look exactly the same. Then I'm going to manipulate this array, ascending order, descending order, whatever, but I'm not going to manipulate that one. Does that make a little bit of sense? All right. So you just look at it. I'm not going to write these, but it's just like every time I run this, it's going to come up with 25 different numbers. All right, and that's the idea. So this main, all main does right here in here is it builds that string that's very similar to the one that we looked at yesterday. So I'm not going to go through that. All right. This, I'm going to create that menu to tell you to enter a 0 if you want to end the program, a 1 to generate the numbers, a 2 to print them in original order, a 3 ascending order, a 4 descending order, a 5 for the largest array element, a 6 for the smallest array element, a 7 for the sum of the array elements, and an 8 for the average. Does that make sense? And when you choose 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, it's going to call a routine that's going to figure that out for you. Does that make sense? All right. So the first thing I do after I do that is I call generate 25 random numbers. If I didn't do that, if I left this off, so I'm going to just, for right now, I'm going to comment that out, and I'm going to run this program again. All right? And it still comes up and it still runs, but the problem is I don't have 25 numbers. So now if I say I want to print out the original array, that doesn't look very good. There's nothing in there. Those are commas. It's very hard to see, but they're commas. Okay, so there's nothing in there. So to force there to be something to work and there to be an array in there at the beginning, what I did was I said, hey, call this thing to randomly generate 25 numbers. And I tried to at least come up with names that were reflective of what it was I was trying to do right there. All right? Now, you may look through this and it may or may not make sense to you. But here's a little, for lack of better words, warning for you. That not next week, I don't think it's next week, I think it's the following week, we'll have a hands-on test for chapters 3 and 4. You will have an array program. I guarantee that you will have an array program. It won't be this one, all right, but you will have an array program, all right? And I've done this before where I've actually given people the electronic copy of this. Then I've walked around where people are doing tests, and I'm not saying any of you would do this or wouldn't do this. I don't know. But what I see people doing then is they're taking my program that already works and trying to modify it while they're writing the test. That's not a good way to do things, all right? When you're taking a test, it should be your work, and it should be something you understand. All right. Does anybody remember what this is called right here? That's in the gray. What? For loop. It is a for loop, but what kind of for loop? I'll give you a hint. It's an infinite for loop because it's going to run forever unless I enter a 0. So I'm telling it to run forever. So I ask you to enter a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, or an 8. If you enter a 0, it's going to end the program. If you enter a 1, it's going to generate 25 new random numbers. If you enter a 2, it's going to print the array in original order. If you enter a 3, which is the array in ascending order, or you enter a 6, which is the smallest number, in both those cases, I'm going to print the array in ascending order. Remember, if I print the array in ascending order, all I have to do is grab that first one that's in there, and that's my smallest number. All right? And then I do the same thing here. This will print it in descending order, and it'll give me the largest number, which will be the first array element. All right? So that'll handle all of these. Then what I have left is the sum and the average. And I decided to combine those into one routine. Because if I ask the person to do the sum first, that's fine, then they've got the sum, then you can just divide it by 25. But if I ask them to do the average before they've done the sum is equal to 0. 0 divided by 25 is going to be 0. Does that make sense? Most of the time when you run this, it'll make more sense to you as you take a look at it. All right? And if you put in anything else, I just said invalid input and break. And I said I can do that and say break because remember, that's in this infinite for loop. So it'll just ask them to do it again. All right? So you are going to be asked, again, this is not a warning, this is a promise. How's that? You will be asked to do something like this whenever your test is for chapters 3 and 4. You will have 4 hours to do that test. I'm not saying you will or won't need it. I don't know. It's in my head right now. But let's see. I believe, so next week we've got lab all Monday, the written test on Tuesday. Oh, we do it. It's next week. The hands-on test for chapters, that's not 2 through 4. It's 3 through 4. All right? And I don't have any problem. I mean, if you'd rather do this, we'll talk about it next week. Okay? We can flip these 2 days. We could push it off a couple of days. That's not a big thing one way or the other. All I have to do is just make a couple superficial changes. But I guarantee you, we will do that test by next Friday. All right? And then we're halfway done with the JavaScript stuff. Okay? Now, when we get to the next part, when we're going through chapter 5, with some of you, it'll be like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. And with some of the rest of you, it's like, God, do I hate this stuff. And people are going to be different because this is going to bring the DOM in, so it's going to be using that get element by ID all the time. Plus, we're going to be combining the JavaScript with CSS, and I'm even going to show you a little bit of jQuery. All right? So just so you have an idea as far as what's going on, okay? All right. So when we look at this, we want to call this generate 25 random numbers. So let's look at that routine. There it is, right here. If you're writing what's considered to be, I'm going to say good code, but it's not good is like, I don't know if that's true or not, but ideally, every function you write will fit on a page. Does that make sense? In other words, it won't be hundreds of lines long. And again, when I say that to people, and I used to actually enforce things like that, this is no joke. I'd have people take their font size and make it 2-point. You couldn't read it, but it all fit on one page. You understand what I'm saying? See, Jeff, I made it on one page, like you said. No. You should be able to work on it at one time. And if you look, well, there's the print, there's the ascending order, there's the descending order, there's the average, and it is, and right there. That's it. So every one of these routines is literally where you can see them all together, and that's good. Because it's nice to know that if I have to make a change up here someplace, I can look at it and say, oh, that might affect this or that might affect this. All right? All right. LCV is what I typically call, and I didn't put comments in here, I should have. It's what I call a loop control variable. It's an LCV, loop control variable. This is, again, the one time that it's considered okay to use IJK or ABC or XYZ or whatever, because all it is it's a control variable. That's it. It doesn't have any other significance. This will be the value of the current array element. All right? So in English, what this is saying is go through this 25 times from 0 to 24, which is 25 times. Every time you go through there, give me a random number between 1 and 100, and actually, since I didn't put +1 here, it probably could even give you 0, That's okay. And assign it to the current number. All right? Oh, that keeps it from happening, the ceiling function. So what this is going to do is it's going to sit there and basically, I'm not going to print them out right yet, but it's going to generate 25 random numbers, 37, 43, 51, 8, etc. And it'll do that 25 times. And this first one will be put into numbers sub 0, numbers sub 1, numbers sub 2, numbers sub 3, and then we'll have about 20 more, and the last one, let's say it's 100. That will be a number sub 24. Does that make sense? Again, look at it like you've got 25 mailboxes, and you're jamming something into each one of those mail slots, which are from 0 through 24. And what you're jamming in there, okay, is whatever value you just generated. And it is possible, the way that this is written, it is possible that you could have the same number more than once. There's nothing at all wrong with it. See, I used to give people this program, and for the program, what they had to do was they had to generate lottery, whatever lottery you play. So you had to generate 6 numbers between 1 and 55. And the students actually thought it was way too easy, because it was like, as I was explaining it, they were writing the code, and they're like, I got mine done already. What aren't you telling us? Well, it's like lottery, right? You can't play the same number twice. That makes it pretty hard. So there's a lot more work if I want to guarantee that the numbers that are in here do not repeat. There's ways of doing it. We won't talk about that right now, but there are ways of doing it. Yes?
Would the repeating number with the code make it so it doesn't work?
No. Well, in that lottery program, it would. Because, again, it's like I'm already using that value.
So it wouldn't
all right?
confuse it if it would be like, oh, I'm trying to call for this one, we're really trying to
Well, let me explain it, and you tell me if I'm answering your question. So what I did was I made 55 mailboxes. Actually, I made 56. I used 0, but I never used it because you can't play number 0. So I had 1 through 55. And the first thing I did was I made an array that I called used. And every time I generated a number, so let's say that I generated a 1 when we started, then this used had been set to false. But as soon as I used that 1, I set it to true.
Okay.
That way, if somebody comes in again and generates another 1, they go, oh, you can't, it's already being used.
Gotcha.
All right? And that's basically the way that you do it. There's, like I said, there are plenty of ways of doing it. All right? I mean, I was amazed. I had one kid, I don't know why, but he just went nuts. Taught himself GUI programming that we hadn't even gone over yet. I don't know if you've ever seen that on TV where they have a ball like come down a little chute, except he did all that. A hell of a lot better than anything I'd ever done. And he had colors, he had it flashing, and where'd you learn all this stuff? I spent all weekend I'm like, well, okay, that's somebody with too much time on their hands. All right? But it was very good, and it worked. So again, this will generate 25 random numbers and take each one of those and stick them into the corresponding array slot. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Then, to say original equal numbers.slice, that's a little weird. First of all, what the heck is slice? Well, I told you before, if you go back and you look at either that Hunlock page that I showed you yesterday, or you go out to w3schools.com and you look up the array slice method, what this is going to do is it's going to copy everything in the numbers array, and it's going to copy it to the array called original. Literally, it's just making a copy of it. It's not the only way that you can do it. We could have done it up here. I could have done this. If you look up on the screen here, I could have done this. I could have said original LCV equals numbers LCV. So what I'm telling you is this line 66 right here, does the exact same thing as what's in this line right here. Exactly. They're going to copy it over. This is going to copy it over one at a time. This is going to copy over all 25 at once. And the reason that I use the one in here on line 69 is to show you the use of some of the built-in array functions. I guarantee you that before I write this, before I give you this test, I will give you like 5 or 10 minutes where I say, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's not going to be a full-fledged test review like we have for the written tests, but I'll say make sure you've done this. What I don't want is I don't want you to come in here and to sit there like this for 4 hours thinking, I don't have a flaming clue as to what he's asking me to do. All right? All right, so that's the first one. Then the next one, print in original order. All that is I can do that with an alert statement because I built it. So that's going to literally print them all in the original order. All right, that's pretty simple. Then next, I want to print it in ascending order. All right, there are so many different algorithms that you can write for putting things in ascending order and putting things in descending order. There are so many of them. All right, and if you look at the one that I wrote in here, where is it? Right here. That's it. If you're sorting non-numbers, everybody hear me? If you're sorting non-numbers, so let's say I put all of your first names in here, and I wanted to sort you by first name. All right? Then all I'd have to say would be numbers.sort, paren. So if you're sorting stuff that's not numbers, you can just call the sort function directly. All right? So as it says, if what I pressed was 3, meaning put them in ascending order, then just print them out. If it was 6, which meant just give me the smallest element, this says just print out the first array element. Does that make sense to people? If I wanted to print out the last array element, in this case it would be numbers, instead of being 0 in there, there'd be 24. All right. And the descending is almost the same, but first I sort it. JavaScript does not have a reverse sort function. Some programming languages do. So I call the sort again, then I call reverse. So if I sorted them and they were in order, I'll just put 5 numbers up here. 1, 3, 57, 81, and 100. If I call reverse, it just reverses the order. So 100, 81, 57, 3, 1. All right. And again, the good news about this is I'm going to try to write a test where you're going to be able to call a lot of the built-in array functions. All right. The average, again, is pretty simple. The sum, I'm just adding them together right there. That's it. So that, what you see up there on the screen in gray, if these are my numbers, I don't care if they're in order or they're not in order. That code that you see on lines 111, 112, and 113 says sum equals 1 plus 3 plus 57 plus 81 plus 100. So those 5 numbers right there would be added together, whatever that is. I don't know what it is. I don't really care. Let's say it's 212. Okay? Then this says take that sum, 212, and divide it by 25. All right? But take the result and do a 2 fixed on it. So it's 2 decimal places.
Does MS stand for max?
I'm trying to remember what I actually had it stand for. Menu selection is what it stands for. And again, we could have called it menu selection, we could have called it anything. Doesn't matter inside of the routine. Remember, we've talked about this before. These are actual parameters, okay? But if I use something inside of a routine where I pass it there, those are formal parameters. They can be the same name, but they don't have to be. It's just much easier to type MS as opposed to menu selection. That's all. So that was quick, all right? But as I've been going through this, any other questions that anybody had?
Is the T string like I'm guessing you have it saved as like the test, like array test? Is that what the T stands for, test string?
It's test string. You could call that anything you wanted.
Just call it string.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of times people will call it STR. You'll see that a lot. Any other questions? Do you understand this as far as setting up a constant and then making the array that size? Because I will ask you to do that. So take a look at it, even if you don't have any questions now. If you have some later, let me know. All right. Question?
On the generate 25 random numbers
Yes.
section, so it says math random, and then the parents, and then times 100.
Yes.
What is the times 100
Okay,
for?
that's a good question. You may or may not be aware of this, but actually the way that random number programs work in any programming language, doesn't matter what it is, any programming language, always returns a number that's greater than or equal to 0 and less than 1. That's what it does. It always, it doesn't give you a whole number. It gives you a partial number. So we're taking that partial number, say it's 0.374. So we're taking that partial number there and we're multiplying it by 100, which gives us 37.4. Then we're saying the ceiling, which means drop off, regardless of what I have here, drop that off. So that'll give us 37. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The opposite of ceiling, anybody want to guess what is the opposite of a ceiling?
Floor.
Floor. So if I use floor, even if it's 37.1, if I use floor, it'll bump it up to 38. So if you want to always bump a number down, there's rounding that you can do too. But that was just too much work. So typically, like in this, you use ceiling or you use floor. All right.
What does,
But again, and I said this to you the other day, I would strongly suggest that you go back, and I gave you the URL for this. This is the Hunlock thing on arrays. And notice they've got examples of all the different stuff you can do with arrays. How to create a new array, how to initialize it, how to store data in it. We haven't even talked about multi-dimensional arrays. All right? We looked at them a real little bit in the chapter, and it's funny because I've had people, I always thought this was funny. I had a guy one day, he was telling me, I just don't understand multi-dimensional arrays. And when he did it, he had a spreadsheet up. That's a multi-dimensional array. That's a two-dimensional array. The only difference is, excuse me, if you work with Excel, you've got ABC along the sides here, and 1, 2, 3. When you're working with arrays in programming languages, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., and it's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And you can have arrays of any dimension. It's very rare that you'll see an array of more than 3 dimensions because it's very hard for people to wrap their heads around something they can't visualize. All right, but there may be a reason for doing that. For instance, if I had all salespeople who were in a certain state, then within a specific region, then within a specific town, etc., then within a specific something else, I might have something that's 4 levels deep. All right, but you end up with stuff that's really ugly because if you're in Excel, and I don't know if you know Excel or not, it's no big thing, but if I asked you what that cell was, you'd say that's cell A1, which it is. But if you were working with it in JavaScript, that's what it would look like. It would be 0, 0. The first one that you put there is the row number. The second one you put there is the column number. It goes in row column order. All right. You're not going to have anything that you have to do in here with multi-dimensional arrays, not in this class. All right, but again, there's a lot of different stuff that's in here. There's the array length. We haven't even talked about associative arrays. All right, and let me just show you that really quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's say that I was going to make an array that was called Midwest States equals array bracket bracket. All right, I could say there, let's put 3 in here. Now, that's not hard. There's only 3 of them right there, so it's no big thing. You could all do that without any kind of problem. But imagine it was all that you had all 50 states. You with me? We've got all 50 states. Okay? And if I look and I go, okay, to guarantee you an A in this class, I mean, right now, tell me what state number Michigan would be. Now, he could guess, and he could probably either get it right or get pretty close. All right? But if I said, now give me this one, now give me this one, you probably would have a hard time getting each one of them. I would. I probably wouldn't get Michigan right anyway. But you get the idea. Now, if I don't want to do that, then I can do this. I'm just going to show you a counterpart to doing this. So instead of doing it like this, I could do this. Oops. See the difference? In the first case, we're using what's called a numerically indexed array. In the second case, we're using what's called an associative array. Okay? And it's a lot easier, I think at least, to use the second one, because now all I have to remember is the abbreviation. Now, I'm not saying that that's still easy, but it's easier to remember WI than what number out of the 50 states Wisconsin would be, for example. All right? So you can use either one of those. Again, this is another example where PHP and JavaScript are the only 2 languages I know that allow you to do that. You can't do this next semester in C#. Can't do it the following semester with ASP.NET. Can't do it the last semester with Java. They just don't allow you to do that. You have to always set up your arrays more like this, where they're numerically indexed. All right? But this is really strong. I mean, it's really, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. All right? And if you think about it, because again, one of the things that you can do in this language is we've talked about this before, so I could come in here and I could say this, since we have an array, I can say person equals array, bracket, bracket. Then I could say person etc. And I could fill in stuff like that if I wanted to. Your program becomes much more self-documenting when you can use associative arrays. They're a little harder when you begin to use them. I haven't shown you the rest of it. When you use them in loops and stuff like this, then you end up using, instead of like this, it looks like this. All right. And that's in both languages, both PHP and in JavaScript. All right. So the only other thing I want to do regarding this stuff before the break then, and let me close a few of these things. All right. Is I want to look at the other one that I gave you. That one's kind of nice in that it's very small. All right, let's see, that's Array Fun V2. Everybody see what's on the board here? 39 lines. That's the entire program. Now, that said, it's not a real well-written program, but when I run it, still gives me everything. The original array, the numbers in ascending order, the smallest, descending order, the smallest, the sum, and the average. But what I did was, rather than writing individual routines, I stuffed everything into main. I literally kept going and going and tried to see how small I could make this program. All right? Now you might say, well, that's fine, but doesn't that kind of go against what you told us? It does. You wouldn't typically want to write programs this way. But sometimes you're writing a program, and I've given this example before, that if you go out, for example, to Ticketmaster, and you say that you want some group that you like is coming to town. So you bring up and you try to get a ticket, get tickets. Usually you'll come up with a screen that says, this screen will remain active for like 90 seconds. And you have to choose tickets during that time or you lose it. Why do they do that? Well, that's part of it, but think about it even more basic than that. All right? What if Ethan and I both want to go to that concert? What they're doing, in my case, is they're freezing him out for 90 seconds. Because we could choose the same tickets. So when it does that, it's literally freezing it out on the screen where I can choose anyone I want that's still available, but no one else can. Then when that 90 seconds comes up, then the next person can do it, who's in the queue, type of thing. Well, when you write code that's like that, quite often, that code is what's called real-time sensitive. All right? And the best example I've ever heard of code that's real-time sensitive is if you were off. Let's say I'm writing a program that's going to figure out how much money you owe on your house. All right? If you're off by a millionth of a point, so 0.000001, that's not, I think you'd agree with this, that's not going to matter. All right? At most, you'd be off a penny, and you probably wouldn't even be off that much. But being off by a millionth of a point could be the difference between hitting the moon with a rocket and missing it. So when you're talking about things that are sensitive, okay, then sometimes you have to write code that's as fast as it can possibly be. Well, the reason I'm telling you that is if you write code and you put everything in one routine, the good news is it runs very fast. The bad news is if you've got an error in it, now you got to look through the whole routine to figure out where the error is. All right? So if we look at the code for this, and it won't take long, we'll be on a break in 5 minutes. Again, notice that in main, there are now there are no global variables. Why? Because there's only a main. So here's all of my variables. I didn't even make constants. I just set it with size 25. So if I decide I want to change this from 25 to 50, I have to change this one, and I have to change this one. And anywhere that's in here now, I got to find where it says if I use 25, I guess that's it. So I got to change that to 50. All right, I have to change my comments too, but notice if I do all that, and I come back here and I run the program again, now I've got 50 numbers. That's all I had to do. Now the advantage, again, of using a constant right here would be if I had said right here, const max equal, let's say we had 25 at the beginning. All right? Then now I could change this to just max, and I could change this to max, and I can change this to max. And you'll notice when I do that and I run the program again, oops, don't want to run the JavaScript though. If I run the program again, now I only have half the numbers because I only have 25. But if I want it to be 50, there's only one place, or wherever I open that one, I guess that's here. All I have to do is change it right there. Does it make sense why you use constants? Especially if you're writing a good example of this is, let's say I'm writing a program for the IRS. Think of all the different tax rates and stuff that they have for people. And there are a lot of them, depending on how much money you make. And think if I was doing not only a federal, but a state one, or 50 state ones. Every state handles taxes a little bit differently. All right? And it's funny, too, because this isn't, what I'm about to tell you isn't funny. The guy who's done my taxes for the last 20 years, he's one of my best friends. He died over the summer. In fact, the first day of classes, I almost missed class because that was his funeral. But I told him I couldn't get off for it. The point is, now this year I'm going to have to get a new tax person. Makes sense, right? So I'm going to have, about 8 months worth of time at Blackhawk. I'm going to have about 4 months worth of time here in Missouri. I'm going to have about 4 months of time because I'm on a pension now from Blackhawk. I couldn't do those taxes myself. All right, not without screwing. I could, but I'd screw them up. All right. But now, if you're writing a program like that, and these are different tax rates, there's only one place I have to change them. So if it goes from 25% to 26, all I have to do is change it right there, and recompile the program, and boom, every place that used it, it's now going to be fixed. All right. So if we look in here, if you notice when we run this, the run is different. And what I mean by that is there's no menu. It just runs it. It says original, ascending, smallest, descending, largest, sum, average. It's just because it's doing all those things in line. All right, whether this is good or bad, when you do your test, you're going to have to write separate functions because that's typically the way that people write code. All right, and I don't want all the students here to be where it's known as these remember that guy who teaches at Rankin and Wentzville, he's the guy who teaches people to code poorly. No. All right, so we come in here and it's the same stuff we looked at before. That's going to generate the 25 random numbers. That's going to copy it over to the original array. That's going to print out the original array. That's going to do the sort. And this is kind of weird when you look at this. A, B, return A minus B. I would suggest if you look at that and it really confuses you, go out to W3 Schools or just Google sorting numbers, ascending or descending, and they'll push you out to the W3 School site. They explain it much better than I could. It's just comparing number by number, and if it's ascending, it's going to move the smallest ones to the top. If it's descending, it's going to move the largest ones to the top. But it's something internal that's written. There's other ways that you can do this. Not all programming languages. I believe C# has a sort, and I believe it has a reverse sort. I don't believe JavaScript or Java, I could be wrong, has either one. What does that mean? You write your own. And if you kind of wanted to see what's going on when you do this, so if I come in here, and I write JavaScript array ascending sort, all right? Well, it says use the sort method, but if you don't want to, all right, and that again, that's going to show you how to do that. Let's say, for example, using bubble sort. All right, and bubble sort, most people use that because it's one of the easiest ones to write. This may not look easy when I show it to you, but it pretty much is. Come on, show me there's the code. And it goes through and it compares one at a time. So if you've got 5 numbers like this, let's say you've got these 5 numbers, but let's pretend they're not in order. All right. So let's say they are in this order. We want them in ascending order. What's going to happen is it's going to compare these two and flip them, compare and flip, compare and flip, compare and flip. When it gets done, the 1 will be there, and probably the way that it'll work, depending on the type that you write, is it'll look like that. Does that make sense? But now when you go to the next time, you don't have to go through all 5. You only have to go through 4. All right. That's a bubble sort. That's not the only sorting way, or the only sorting algorithm. This is actually a pretty good site here, this Coding Miles, because they're showing you what's happening every time that you're going through there. All right. That's the good news. The bad news is bubble sorts are very, very, very slow. It's okay if you're only sorting 25 or 50 things. I mean, even a computer can sort 1 million things pretty quickly. But if you get up into the billions and the trillions, etc., it's going to slow it down using a bubble sort. So there's other sorts that you can use as well. Okay. And again, you might say, that's fine. I understand this. Why do you care that much about this being sorted? Because once you sort, it makes it real easy to search for things. And I've given you that example before. That's why phone books, if you still use them, but that's why phone books are still in alphabetic order. If they weren't in any order whatsoever and I wanted to look up Evan's number, I'd have to start at the beginning and just keep looking through. But since I know his last name starts with R, that at least narrows it down. That throws away 25 letters of the alphabet to worry about. All right, so what we're going to do then after the break is we're going to come back and I'm going to give you these other handouts, and we're going to look at those, which are some, he called these challenge exercises. You don't have to do these. I would guarantee you pretty much if you do these and you understand them, you should be able to ace the test. I would suggest if you do 1 or more of these that you print them out. So you've got it. It's very, I don't know how you are when you take tests, but some people like to have hard copies of this and that. Other people like to have electronic copies, but it's kind of tough if you've got 15 things open on your screen at the same time to bounce back and forth. But again, everybody's different. All right, let's come back. Let's make it 5 after 9, please.